My name is Claire Anderson. I'm 30 years old, and exactly 1 year ago on Thanksgiving night, I sat alone in my tiny city apartment, a glass of red wine in hand, eyes fixed on my phone screen. All over social media were snapshots of family gatherings, golden roasted turkeys, warm lights, hugs, laughter, blessings. In one photo, I saw my own family gathered at our suburban house. Mom was slicing pie, Dad was pouring wine, and right in the center, glowing like the star of every shot, was my sister, Sabrina. I hadn't been invited. Not a single call, not a single text, not one word asking how I was doing. It wasn't until 3 days before that evening that Mom called to ask. I blinked, confused. "A plate of what, Mom?" She hesitated for a few seconds, then said, "From Thanksgiving dinner." "Sabrina said you told us you were busy with work and couldn't make it." The feeling was like being shoved off a rooftop with no warning. I had never said that. My sister had spoken for me, cutting me out of my own family gathering in the quietest, cleanest, and most brutal way. I texted her, trying to stay calm. "You told everyone I wasn't coming." Sabrina replied with just 3 words, "You're busy, right?" and a crooked smile emoji. I set my phone down on the table. My heart felt as hollow as my kitchen without voices. I didn't cry. I was used to being on the outside. But what Sabrina never saw coming was this. Exactly 1 year later, at our mom's birthday party, her husband, Ethan, would walk into the room, spot me among the crowd, and bow slightly before saying, "Hello, boss," right in front of everyone, including her. Have you ever been dismissed or excluded by the very people who were supposed to love you the most on days that should have been sacred? If so, drop a comment and let me know where you're watching from. And if you've ever quietly endured only to rise one day on your own terms, hit subscribe. This story is for you. I grew up in a 2-child household in suburban Minnesota. I was the oldest, and Sabrina, my younger sister, was 2 years behind me. If I was born to be quiet, Sabrina was born to shine. Golden hair, a charming smile, eyes that somehow made you feel like you were the most important person in the room. From an early age, she knew how to command attention, and she did it so effortlessly that no one ever noticed. The people left behind. People like me. I wasn't an unlovable child. I was the good daughter type. Studious, never caused trouble, helped clean the house, did math for Mom, tutored Sabrina when our parents were busy. I loved books, loved tinkering with old computers and little circuits, loved figuring out how things worked. But none of that was ever really noticed. In my family, being quiet was of a virtue. It was just something forgettable. My dad always had a special place in his heart for Sabrina. He used to joke, "Sabrina is Daddy's sunshine." It sounded innocent enough, but I was the cloudy sky he never even bothered to look at. When I was in 5th grade, I spent weeks building a solar energy model for the school science fair, designed it myself, took notes, tested every detail. I cried from joy when they announced I'd won first prize. But when I brought the medal home, Dad glanced at the model briefly, then turned to ask, "Sabrina, did you help your sister with this? My girl is a genius." Sabrina, who was only 8 at the time, grinned ear to ear, soaking in the praise like she was the one who had earned it. I stood there, gripping the trophy, wondering why it suddenly felt so weightless. Piece by piece, my self-worth was chipped away. By praise given to the wrong person, by dinners where no one asked about my day, by holiday breaks where I worked shifts and practiced coding while Sabrina went skiing. She was always the one who got more. The prettier holiday dress, the final say on which channel we watched at night. Me. I was just Sabrina's sister. The first betrayal came in 8th grade. I had written an essay about To Kill a Mockingbird, an essay my teacher said was worthy of a spot in a high school literary magazine. I left it proudly on my desk. A week later, I was called into the principal's office. They asked, "Did you give this essay to your sister to submit?" I was stunned. Sabrina had taken my paper, replaced my name with hers, and submitted it as her own to the school's writing competition. Even though the teacher knew the truth, all Sabrina had to do was shed a few tears. I just wanted Dad to be proud of me the way he is with Claire. And just like that, it became my fault. Because I was too good, because I didn't share the spotlight with my little sister. But then it happened again, year after year, forgiveness, hurt, forgetting, repeat. By the time we reached high school, our lives split down two very different paths. I immersed myself in coding and science projects. She became head cheerleader, the face of the school. Once, over dinner, I proudly mentioned that I had won second place statewide for the first online learning software I coded. Sabrina laughed and said, "Oh my God, Claire, could you be any more of a nerd? No wonder you've never had a boyfriend." The whole family burst out laughing. Even Mom just chuckled. "Sabrina, don't tease your sister like that," though she didn't even try to hide her amusement. I forced a smile, then slipped away into my room, whispering to myself that one day I would turn all my dry lines of code into something the whole world couldn't ignore. But it wasn't until college that the favoritism truly became impossible to overlook. I got a full scholarship to study computer science at the state university. I lived in a cramped apartment with 3 roommates, worked part-time in the campus coffee shop at night. Sabrina? She chose a fancy private college with no declared major. My parents emptied their savings to cover her tuition, rent, credit cards, and even the fees for her prestigious sorority. They didn't think there was anything wrong with it. "Sabrina needs the chance to explore herself," Mom would say. And me, I just needed enough money to buy ramen. During those years, I didn't expect anything more than survival and graduation. I knew I had no one to rely on. But I had something else, resolve. I knew I was on the right path. I just never imagined that path would eventually lead me to a place where even Sabrina— I can't quite pinpoint the moment I officially became invisible in my own family, but I remember vividly how that feeling began to creep in. It was when every dinner conversation revolved around Sabrina, her new boyfriend, her upcoming vacations, the drama in her sorority. It was when Dad would ask, "School going okay?" And the moment I nodded, he turned to Sabrina to ask about her new dress. It was when Mom told me to take my sister to get her hair done, but sent the money to Sabrina while I had to pay for the cab with my part-time wages. I stayed quiet, not because I was weak, but because I was used to it. After graduation, I landed an internship at a small tech company called Vironics Labs. Back then, it had barely a dozen employees working out of a dusty old warehouse. No one in my family asked me anything about the job. When I called to share the good news, Mom simply said, "That's great, honey. Oh, by the way, Sabrina just got picked to be a marketing assistant for a really well-known cosmetics brand. She's super busy too." I didn't expect anything more. Every holiday or break, I picked up extra shifts. Sabrina, on the other hand, would fly in from New York, arms full of luxury gifts and stories about powerful men who were interested in her. Every time she came home, she was the queen, and me, I held coats, carried luggage, and cooked dinner. One year, I gifted my parents a set of travel books because they had once mentioned wanting to explore Europe after retirement. Sabrina gave them an expensive spa voucher. Mom teared up with emotion. Dad said, "Sabrina's always so thoughtful. She just knows what we need." And me, they looked at my gift like it was some outdated, useless trinket. The clearest moment I ever threw her engagement party. No invitation, no text, no announcement. I only found out because Mom casually mentioned during one of our regular calls. The flowers that day were gorgeous. Sabrina picked the exact kind I loved back when I was young. I froze. "What party, Mom?" Silence. Then a hushed reply. "Oh no, I thought you knew. Maybe she assumed you were busy." I didn't ask anything more. I opened Instagram. There they all were, our entire extended family. Mom and Dad, aunts and uncles, even our grandparents flew in from Florida. Sabrina in a white dress, holding a deep red bouquet, kissing her fiancé. Ethan by a shimmering pool lined with fairy lights. And me? I sat in my apartment, biting my lip as I shut off my phone in quiet rage. I called Sabrina that night. I wasn't angry. I just asked, didn't it feel strange that I wasn't there? She chuckled softly through the phone, the sound thudding against my chest like a hammer. "You wouldn't have clicked with my friends anyway. They're all in finance and marketing. You'd be bored. And you hate crowds, remember?" I still don't know what hurt more. the rejection itself, or how casually she said it, as if it were the most ordinary thing in the world. Like I was an extra puzzle piece that didn't fit into the perfect picture of her life. I started shrinking into myself, and the careless words from my family only grew sharper. Claire's always busy. She never really fits in. She's like a stranger sometimes. Sabrina always thinks about others. Whenever I did show up at family gatherings, I'd be seated at the far end of the table. No one asked me about work. No one remembered what I liked to eat. One time, I reached for the last remaining plate, and Mom stopped me. "That's for the guests, sweetheart." Even though I was her daughter, I used to think I could get used to it, that I was just too different, too hard to understand. But the more I tried to succeed, the more I felt severed from the roots I was supposed to belong to. The harder I worked, the further I was pushed from my family. I remember one dinner in particular, my dad's 60th birthday. The whole family gathered at a fancy Italian restaurant. I had just wrapped up a major project at Vironics Labs, where I was gradually stepping into a lead integrity role. When Dad raised his glass for a toast, he named each person. Sabrina for booking the venue, Ethan for getting Sabrina there on time, our cousin for singing the birthday song, and me, not a word. I sat there beneath flickering candlelight, wine swirling in my glass, and felt like I didn't exist. But later that night, driving alone through the quiet streets, I whispered to myself, "One day, they'll know who I am. Not Sabrina's sister, not the IT girl, but Clara Anderson, the woman who quietly built a world they can no longer ignore." That day came on my mother's 60th birthday. It was a gorgeous weekend afternoon. The sky was so clear it felt like even the universe knew this day mattered. Sabrina, of course, took charge of planning. A week before, she'd started a family group chat to assign tasks. Her message to me was as offhand as a scribble in the margin. "Claire, just bring the drinks, okay? Something easy, don't get too weird with it." "No thank you. No, how are you?" I almost didn't go. I nearly ordered an expensive gift to be delivered with a polite note just to get it over with. But then Mom called the night before. "I really want you there, even if it's just to sit and talk to me for a bit." I couldn't say no to that voice, so I made a choice. If I was going to show up, I'd do it on my own terms, quietly, gracefully, but unmistakably. I didn't just bring drinks. I created a full beverage table, chilled white wine, imported French champagne, organic juices, mocktails with fresh fruit, and even specialty glasses rented from an event service. I printed tasting guides for flavor pairings and arranged everything neatly, beautifully, and thoughtfully. When I arrived early to set it all up, Sabrina emerged from the garden decor area. She looked momentarily surprised. "Oh, this looks decent," she said. The reluctance in her compliment was almost comical. I smiled. I didn't need her validation anymore. Mom appeared not long after. When she saw the drink table and the digital photo frame I'd placed on the gift table, something I had carefully prepared, loaded with hundreds of family photos she thought were lost during the basement flood years ago, she broke into tears. "Dashes even find these," she whispered, hugging me tightly. For the first time in years, I felt seen in my mother's eyes. The party soon came to life. Relatives arrived, friends of my parents trickled in, and as always, Sabrina led the introductions. "This is Ethan, my husband. He's in finance. This is the new house we just bought in Lake Forest. And me, still just Sabrina's sister." I stood off to the side, poised and polite as I always did, until 3 men walked in through the back gate. I recognized Leo first, Ethan's best friend, someone I'd glimpsed briefly at their wedding. Next to him was Ethan, his usual easygoing, self-assured self. The third man was unfamiliar. I didn't think twice, until Leo locked eyes with me and visibly jolted. I saw his lips form the words, "Holy crap." He leaned in and whispered something to Ethan. Ethan frowned at first, then slowly turned to look at me. His eyes blinked in recognition. Then, right there, in the middle of laughter and chatter at a simple weekend gathering, he walked straight toward me. "Claire," he asked, almost in disbelief. "Are you?" I nodded calmly. "Hello, Ethan," and then he bowed his head. In front of me, In front of Sabrina, in front of my mother, in front of everyone who had ever looked through me. It's a real honor to meet you here, ma'am. Boss. Silence fell over the party like shattering glass. Heads turned. Sabrina froze. Her eyes darted around in confusion, trying to process what had just happened. Leo, clearly flustered, tried to explain. Claire's the CEO of Vironix Labs, the company we just joined. She's the one everyone in engineering talks about. We had no idea she's Sabrina's sister. I heard a soft clink. Someone's champagne glass had slipped from their hand. Whispers stirred around the party. She's the CEO, Claire, Vironix, that's been in the news lately. Sabrina stood frozen, mouth slight agape, lips moving but no words coming out. She turned to Ethan, stunned. Are you serious? She's the one who approved your application, Leo answered for him. She also led the demo projects you had to present. I didn't say a word. I just stood there, like I had so many times before. Only this time, every pair of eyes was on me. My mother slowly stepped forward, gently took my hand. You're the woman I've been seeing in the papers these past few months. I turned to her, smiled softly. Yes, Mom, though I thought you didn't care much about computer stuff. She hesitated, then she squeezed my hand tight. I do care. I just never knew how to ask. I nodded, letting out a quiet breath. It had taken over 20 years and one boss in the middle of a garden party for them to finally see me. And Sabrina, she let out a stiff chuckle and muttered to someone nearby. My sister's amazing, she just doesn't like to brag. But her eyes, unsteady, clouded, told the truth. That day, for the first time in my life, I was no longer Sabrina's sister. It was Claire Anderson. And they knew it. Many at the party thought I was a prodigy, someone lucky to rise at the right time. But if they knew the road I'd walked to get here, they might understand why I didn't need applause, why I didn't need crave compliments. I just needed to not be dismissed anymore. My story with Vironix Labs started in a run-down storage warehouse, with creaky wooden floors and a leaking roof whenever it rained. Back then, the company had only 15 people. I was the new software engineer, fresh out of college with a computer science degree and a heart full of fire. The founder, Calvin Tran, was a brilliant mess, a Vietnamese-born programmer with his head always drifting in new ideas but little knack for management. He lived on coffee and napkin sketches. I admired his recklessness, his hunger to build a product that was so easy even non-tech people could use it. And I knew deep down we worked until 2 or 3 in the morning, living on instant noodles, napping under our desks. I kept a small foldable pillow and blanket set in my locker. Weekends became meaningless, but I never felt tired because for the first time I felt like I belonged somewhere. No one mocked me for loving algorithms. No one dismissed my input. Calvin always asked, Claire, what do you think? And he actually listened. Our first product launched after 8 months, a data visualization tool for small businesses, and it was a disaster. The system couldn't handle high data volumes, performance lagged, the user experience was too complex. Staff comments left, investors raised red flags, the team was on the verge of collapse. But I refused to let it die. I quietly rebuilt the entire system architecture from scratch. Then I pitched a new direction. Target large enterprises, real budgets, real needs. I proposed shifting from standard chart interfaces to something new, data intuition, where users could interact with their information as if they were having a conversation with AI. I wrote the first prototype in 2 sleepless weeks, averaging less than 3 hours of rest per night. When I finally presented it to the team, some were skeptical. But Calvin looked me in the eye and said, if you believe in it, I believe in you. We started over line by line, demo by demo, and 3 months later we launched Vironix Insight, a platform for large-scale healthcare organizations to analyze complex data effortlessly. Our first client signed on, a hospital network with over 5,000 employees. I stood in that boardroom wearing a clearance rack blouse, hands trembling as I signed the first 6-figure contract of my life. Calvin raised a paper cup of champagne and said, this is because of Claire. Without her, Vironix would have died last month. A few months later, we closed our Series A round, $20 million, 0 cents. And then Calvin walked into my office, hands slightly shaking. "Claire," he said, "the board and we want you to be chief product officer." I was speechless. Never in my life had I been recognized by people truly capable of seeing my worth. From that point on, I entered the most intense chapter of my life, leading the product team, expanding the engineering group, and preserving the soul of the company, even as capital began flooding in. Each day I learned how to be part engineer, part motivator, part ruthless decision-maker. I learned to say no to ideas that didn't align. I learned to defend my team even when they made mistakes. And I learned how to fail without falling apart. Then one day, Calvin called me into his office. His face was pale. "I've been diagnosed with stage 3 lymphoma." I froze. Calvin was the one who gave me a chance. The one who saw me when my own family had no idea what I even did for a living. Then he said, "The board agrees. You'll be the next CEO of Vironix Labs." No interviews, no battles, just trust. Absolute and unshaken. I signed the new contract at a salary I'd never dared to imagine, but more importantly, I was given the power to choose who I wanted beside me. My hiring philosophy was simple. It wasn't about where you went to school, it was about whether you respected others, whether you could own your mistakes, whether you had the courage to say, "I don't know." I kept my life simple. The apartment I moved into was only twice the size of my old one, but it had floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the whole city. I kept my old laptop as a keepsake, and I was still the last one to leave the office every night. When the first article called me the new face of women in tech leadership, I didn't post it on Facebook. I printed it, folded in half, and tucked it into one of Mom's drawers. Today, if she happens to find it, maybe she'll understand why I didn't show up to that family dinner. Because I was at the office, signing a contract that brought the company she once called playing with computers to a valuation of over $500 million. 0 cents. And I didn't need to say a word. I just needed to keep going. Keep proving. The morning after Mom's birthday party, I had breakfast alone, at a small table near the window in a hotel cafe. Sunlight streamed gently through white curtains, warming the rim of my coffee cup. I thought it would be a quiet morning, until a shadow paused at the edge of my table. It was Sabrina. She wasn't wearing one of her usual fitted dresses or designer blazers, just a soft beige sweater, dark jeans, and a face, perhaps for the first time in years, completely bare, marked only by genuine worry. "Can I sit with you?" she asked. Her voice wasn't sharp, wasn't mocking. No sarcasm, no superiority, just quiet. I nodded, silent. For a moment she stirred her coffee in 3 slow circles. She didn't drink it, just stared down. But now, it didn't hurt anymore. "Sabrina," I said gently, "when you're the person your whole family sees right through, you eventually learn to hide the most important parts of yourself, just to feel safe." She didn't respond. I went on. "In the last 10 years, when has anyone, including you, asked me a real question about my life, my work, what I've been fighting for, not 'are you still alive out there,' but a real question, one that comes from real care?" Sabrina bit her lip. For the first time, her eyes weren't blazing, they were glassy, on the verge of tears. I guess," she faltered. "I thought you didn't need anyone. You were always so good at everything, always doing things on your own." She exhaled, shaking her head. I felt like I was the one being compared. "Dad always said you were the smart one, so I thought." I blinked. I hadn't expected that. That the darkness inside her was the very light I had longed for. Sabrina lowered her gaze. "I was jealous of you, all these years. I was scared that if you succeeded, people would see me as just someone riding your shadow. So I created distance, filled it with shiny things, distractions. But when Ethan bowed his head and called you boss, I realized I never really understood who you are." She wiped her tears, and I stayed silent. Then suddenly she looked up, her voice softer now but still carrying the echo of who she used to be. "If Ethan does well, could you maybe help him move up? You're still looking for a director of sales, right?" I looked her straight in the eyes. This was the line, and this time I wasn't stepping back. "Sabrina, I run a company where everyone has to prove their worth. Ethan will move up if he's good, not because he's your husband." If I help him out of personal ties, then I'd be disrespecting all the people at Vironics who work their hearts out every day. The same way our family once disrespected me, and I won't do that." She went quiet. It seems she hadn't expected such a direct rejection. But she didn't argue. She simply nodded, slowly. "I get it," she said. "I guess you don't want to forgive me." I took a sip of coffee. "No, I already have. But forgiveness doesn't mean allowing the same patterns again. Forgiveness means I move forward, without carrying what no longer deserves to come with me." She looked at me for a long moment, then gave a faint smile. "I always thought you were the weaker one. Turns out, you're stronger than all of us." I didn't respond, because I wasn't here to win. I just wanted to be seen, and that morning, for the first time, in a conversation without parents, without filters, without Instagram, Sabrina finally saw me. We left the cafe not long after. No hug, no grand promises, but there was an unspoken agreement. If we were to go on from here, we'd start with the truth. Before leaving town, I invited my parents to lunch. Just a small Italian place, not fancy, just the kind I used to love in high school. The smell of garlic butter and toasted bread lingered in the air like the soundtrack to a memory. They arrived on time. Mom wore a soft floral dress, Dad still in a crisp white shirt and the same old watch he reserved for special occasions. We ordered our food, then silent. I braced myself, thinking they'd start talking about Sabrina again, the new house, the beach vacation. But they didn't. Dad spoke first, something that had never happened in a meal with both me and Sabrina present. "I don't know much about tech," he said, awkwardly. "But after yesterday, I looked up Vironics, saw your name on one article, then another. And I have to say, I'm proud." I looked up, he avoided my eye. "I always thought you were independent, strong. I figured that meant you didn't." Mom reached for my hand. Her fingers were thinner than I remembered. "I'm sorry I didn't ask you more. I assumed you were okay because you never complained. But I forgot. Sometimes the quiet ones are the ones who need to be heard the most." I swallowed hard. Not because the words came too late, but because, finally, I wasn't the only one trying to keep the conversation going. I told them about my work in the simplest examples I could, about how our company helped a hospital detect early signs of an outbreak from data patterns, about an app we built to help farmers track climate change, about how I wasn't just doing something with computers, I was using technology to make real impact. And for the first time, my parents listened from beginning to end. No interruptions, no pivoting back to Sabrina. Before we said goodbye, I said, "If you ever want to visit the office, I'd love to show you around. We have a pretty nice guest room. And better espresso than Starbucks." Dad chuckled. A real laugh this time, no stiffness. "We'll come. I want to see where Claire Anderson." We hugged outside the restaurant. For the first time, it wasn't just polite. It was the kind of hug that made me feel like I was home and didn't need permission to be there. Back in the city, I walked into the Vironics office like I always did. The engineers greeted me with smiles and quick updates on progress. Ethan, Sabrina's husband, was in a product meeting, fully engaged. He was doing well, not because he was family, but because he worked for it. He learned, he listened, had the skills. And he never once brought up my mother's birthday. Never asked for special treatment. I respected him for that. Few months later, I began receiving weekly texts from Sabrina. They weren't the casual "how have you been" messages anymore. They were real. "I read your interview yesterday. Amazing. I just tried the Vironics demo, so easy to use." We didn't magically become the picture-perfect sisters overnight. But something had shifted, deeply, genuinely. One day, Sabrina video called me. On the screen were both her and Ethan, sitting in their living room. Ethan scratched his head, grinning. "Hey boss, can you help me fix our internet?" And they both burst into laughter. For the first time in years, I laughed too. Not perfectly, but honestly. And if there's one thing I've learned through all of this, it's this. You can't force people to recognize you, but you can build a life that makes underestimating you laughable. I used to think my worth depended on my father's gaze, my mother's smile, or my sister's praise. But no, my worth lived in the all-nighters I pulled to rebuild broken code, in the quiet persistence after being excluded, in the resolve I held onto when no one stayed. I didn't abandon myself. Today, I don't need their approval. I just need to keep going. And if there ever comes a day when you feel forgotten, dismissed, cut off from the very people you thought were home, I hope you remember this. You haven't disappeared. You're just growing beyond their line of sight. If you've ever been the forgotten one in your family, if you've ever been left out of the photo, left off the list, called weird or too different, then I hope this story made you feel a little less alone. Because here's the truth I've come to understand. Not everyone will see your value. That doesn't mean you don't have it. Sometimes family isn't always right. They're just people, carrying wounds, comparisons, and their own fear of failure. You don't need to prove anything to them. You just need to not give up on yourself. Because one day, without screaming, without fighting, your life will speak loud enough for you. Have you ever experienced something similar? Have you ever been left out of the place you once called home? Drop your story in the comments below. I'd love to read it. And if you saw yourself in this story, like and subscribe so you won't miss the journeys to come. Who knows? Next week the story might be yours. Thank you for listening, and never forget, you don't need to be chosen. You just need to choose yourself.